Hey, good morning everyone. Welcome to Coffee Talk. It's a chance to connect and make sure that you're up to speed on everything going around in the ministry of Lakeview Heights Baptist Church this week. So thanks for spending some time with us. And it's AGM season around here, which means Sunday night is our annual general meeting. I hope you're not sick of us talking about it, but this is the last Coffee Talk where we do for another, 50 weeks. And then it'll be back. But so that's partly reminder, 6:30 Sunday night. Join us on Zoom or here in person if you are able and you're comfortable with that. Not here like in the youth room where we're recording this, but here downstairs, right? Like that's, this would not be a great room to put more than, 15 people in. But in our sanctuary, we'll be down there in person. For discussion for us, because that's really the only main point of information that everyone needs. I know that this is a season where I look back on the last year of ministry. Sometimes that involves personal stuff too, as thinking back through what was our family doing, and sometimes it brings to mind just events and significant moments that don't necessarily make their way into the annual report. And so what I wanted to do, thought we'd do this morning is take some time and maybe just share a reflection or two that we've all had on the last year. And it can be any of that, here's something that didn't warrant the report or something personal or something that, as you've been thinking back on the last year, Jeff and Kevin, what's come up for you guys that has been significant, or that, let's put it this way, what is that, I forgot all about that moment that happened for you guys?
You want to go?
Well, no, I had to think about this one a little bit because it's funny how you get into routines, right? Mm-hmm. So right now we're in the routine of what feels like quote unquote regular church.
Yeah.
When I was looking back, I put in there that for 6 months, we still had nobody in the sanctuary on a Sunday morning besides the worship team and the tech crew. And I remember some of those Sundays, and like we're all sitting with masks on, we're all spread out in a giant room, and there's like 10 of us, and that was a very interesting but a little bit kind of intimate as well, because it was just, we got to enjoy it, and we we're the only ones who got to hear Jeff preach for the first few times in sermon, right? Or in person. And so that there was 6 months of that. And then the other one that kind of jumped out at me was that, and Jeff, you kind of talked about this as we were preparing some of our reports, but that Lorena Saunders had her, we had her funeral and memorial here with just the family, just a handful of people, and it was live streamed, and yet there was still only a couple of people in the room at that time, and that was very interesting and very different, and it just kind of blew me away. That felt like a really, really long time ago, and I think it's because when I think about that sense of routine, it's been like we've been doing services now for 6 months in person. Yeah. It just feels like that's normal. That's the way things have always been. But it hasn't. It really only was 6 months ago that we kind of got back together, and I wasn't even there for that. So,
and I remember it being a big deal. We're gonna have people in the room. Oh, what do we do? Like we gotta get ready. It was funny. Now it's like you said, it's normal. But when it's not for so long, it's weird.
Well, and I remember we had that sense around here that it was almost like the will they, won't they? Yeah. Will they let us have church people in the room? Won't they? And so and then when we realized,
and will people even show up?
Yeah. And, well, that was you're absolutely right.
Will they wear masks? Won't they?
Right. And so that first week of Kevin's sabbatical was the. Okay, this is a test run. I think we're allowed people, but maybe it wasn't the first week. Is that real early on? So we we had will it all work, right? And it was that was an interesting challenge.
And pretty early on, we were open up, no restrictions. So we had one Sunday where we all came. and then we had that pulled pork afterwards that the fellowship committee put together.
Yeah.
It was really awesome. And you weren't there.
Well, no,
to miss that.
but
The one fellowship event of the year.
That's true. The one maskless one. But then I was also at a church around that time in the Lower Mainland, which shall remain nameless, where I was the only one with a mask on.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a couple hundred people there.
Wow.
That was awkward.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it is. Isn't it weird? Like I walked in, okay, not a couple hundred people, but I walked into an office yesterday in West Kelowna, and I was the only one in a mask. I'm like, this is a small office, and you're all just hanging. Okay, this is weird. And you're serving me over a counter, and there's no like plexiglass.
Oh, man.
It's like I'm 3 feet away from you, and I'm like, whatever. I'm like, can I just get some eye protection? Like it was, whatever. But yeah, it's unsettling, right? Sometimes. Anyways, other reflections though, because that's on the past year. Jeff, anything?
Sure. Yeah. For me, it's interesting because we kind of went through an exercise a few weeks ago, the three of us, where we kind of month by month. So I was just looking at that again, and it's so, like you said, it's so crazy how quickly you forget. But we had just moved in December, and my house was full of boxes everywhere. So like this year, I'm like, January, okay, let's play some games. Like playing games with my sons and just having some downtime in the in the winter cold and whatever. But last year, I was drywalling Cheryl's room, getting ready for tile. I was framing out Jack's room, like for several months. I think all the way into May or June before I got Jack into his. I think it was June or July actually before I got Jack's room done and him into his room. And now that just seems so long ago, and I forget. And I'm working on trimming the rest of the house, but just all that stuff that had to happen. Cheryl and I had to organize everything, and we still have some of that to do. But crazy.
Do you remember? And I wish I had worked this out and planned something. Do you remember really not just what it was like, but what do you remember of your first sermons here at Lakeview, preaching in January?
I remember looking at the camera. Like now I don't even notice the cameras because there's people and I get to look at people. But I remember thinking, this is weird, but it's actually a good opportunity to just get used to being here without feeling the pressure of, like you try to get out of that. Like it's not me people are looking at, it's the message that God's given me that I really think people need to hear. But you can't get out of your own skin and realize that people are, so when I was looking at the camera, it's like, camera's not going to judge me. I mean, it probably judges worse than people in those seats, but it just was a weird, I don't know, a bit of, I don't know if that explains it well, but well, you did it too. You preached in front to the camera. It's strange. It's easier and harder. Like it's both.
It's different. I don't hate it. I'll be honest. I was just like, okay, whatever. We'll talk to a camera. Because, but in my head, it's always like, no, I know there's people on the other side of it. If I didn't have that confidence, knowing that there was people on the other side of it, and it was, is anybody going to ever watch this? Then maybe it would be a little different. But I mean, I don't know. Part of what it's also, it's funny because in a TV show, if they look at the camera, like it's always, if you're acting or whatever, you're like, oh, don't look at the cameras, act like it's not there. But then when it comes to preaching for a screened audience, you're like, no, you gotta, make
you want
some
to be personal,
contact. Right.
Unless you're Jim from The Office.
Well, exactly, right? but it was always, or the one in my head is always the Saved by the Bell, right? I don't know, some of us are of a certain generation. But anyways, so for me, one of the things that jumped up was as I was preparing my part, I'm like, okay, I was thinking back on VBS. I'm like, okay, VBS. I remember we put this big plan together. We're like, we're going to be outside. We're going to do this. And I was like prepping a stage and all that. And then like 2 days before, but then, no, so then finished the complete thought of the story is, I'm like, but we didn't use it. We weren't outside. What happened? And I was trying to remember, why did VBS not happen 100% outside the way we had everything planned?
Well,
with tents.
You planned it carefully because
Absolutely.
you had to have people spread out, so you had 3 different tents, and yeah.
We had all this detail, all this work done, and then I'm like, but I don't remember using any of it. And I was like, is my brain broken? I'm like, I know my memory's not awesome. Did I just black out VBS? I'm like, no, it had to be different. And then I went, oh yeah, the smoke.
Yes.
Right?
It was
and
bad,
that week
yeah.
of July in particular was so heavy that we're like, this isn't going to be a good thing.
And the funny thing is that was on the heels of the heat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, super
right?
heat, yeah.
So it was, and I was ready to be like, all right, it's hot, whatever, we'll be outside. We just won't do a ton of running. And I was like, even planning out like, ooh, let's get misting stations and we'll do all this stuff to kind of cool down our area. And then just days before, I'm like, well, this isn't going to work.
And restrictions changed. So you were allowed.
Well, you're right.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
We were allowed to move inside, and then it became, I'm going to smoke. Why are we not inside? And so we did. We did move inside, and it was a whole thing.
And that brings to mind, one thing that I appreciated about you guys is you invited me into a lot of family stuff, like with your families, right? So we camped together 1 week in May or something at Bear Creek,
Well, go ahead.
No, I mean, I just remember that. That was so fun. Like all of us families were camping, you know, like in our own campgrounds, but, and then in the smoke, we were at Green Bay, and we just sat by the beach in the smoke.
Oh, 100%.
Couldn't see the other side. And it was like, why are we sitting outside? It's smoky, but where else are we going to go? So
right, because and I do remember the one night sitting down at the beach at Green Bay, and I think it was the May weekend, because they had a few weekends where families could just come and camp there, right?
Yeah.
And sitting on the beach with some people from our church, we were all camping down at Green Bay, looking across the lake, and it was grad weekend, or like dry grad weekend, and just seeing all the every now and then you'd see like a fire light up across the lake. You just see that glow, right? And it's so recognizable, and even though it's across the lake, and then a little while later there'd be like flashing police car lights, right, heading off to the It's like, oh man, it felt like, I mean, we weren't phoning the police, we were just sort of like, oh, look at that. It was just kind of like a show, you know, as we were sitting, hanging out by the beach, right? Or I remember too, like last March, so even though winter was not cold, like it was not a real bad winter, I remember by March, we were so eager for what can we do outside with other people that it was a lot of, we had so many like wiener roasts and bonfires and stuff. I remember like Bear Creek was open that people could just walk around the campground and the park and stuff. And, you know, we'd take a wagon down into a campsite and use a fire pit. We did that a bunch, and we were exploring other places. Where else can we go?
You guys teased me for my parka that I had on.
That's true. That's true.
And then Karis comes walking in bare feet.
Right.
And Ezra always had his knives and everything.
Oh man. That's inside and outside.
I guess so.
Even last night, we were getting ready for bed. He's like, "Hey, Dad, which of these knife blades do you think is the cooler one?"
You better put those into bed.
Like, yeah, you're not bringing those into bed, are you? No.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great.
So it's, anyways, it was a real full year, but it's really easy, isn't it, to forget some of those important, not even, at the time I'm sure they don't feel all that important, but they gave some shape and some context to everything else going on. And I know I'm already at that point where it's like, okay, I just want the snow gone. I want to be outside. I want to, this morning I was like, oh, we're going to film Coffee Talk from the youth room. I miss going outside. Even though it was at the time, it was like, okay, where can we go where we're not going to hear the highway? It was just nice to be outside. And so it's a couple months off, but spring is approaching. But more than that, I think it's good for us just to encourage one another to not rush through the days so fast that we miss the the small things that actually kind of give some context to everything else that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that we have it as part of our job to look back on the year that was. Probably a good encouragement for you, church, to take some time and do that every now and then too.
And that's even what the AGM and even like the annual budget allows us to do, is to kind of have not a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month kind of thing, but actually like think in larger terms as well too. You know, okay, over the last 3 years, what does that look like, and those kinds of things. That's it opens things up to a larger perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, good. You know, that's kind of our encouragement for you this week. Other than, you know, join us on Sunday night. Like, don't forget that, 6:30. If you need the Zoom link, make sure you just connect with the office this week to double check that we've got all your contact info right, so that we can send it out and get you in to that meeting that way. Or join us in person on Sunday evening. Other than that, thanks for spending some time with us, and we will see you soon.